Randy and Mary Travis, welcome to Biscuits and Jam.
Oh, we're so excited about this, right up our alley.
Well, it's great to be here with you in person in your home in Nashville. It's such an honor to be here
Thank you
sitting with y'all. Thanks for having me. Thanks for your hospitality.
So sweet. Thanks for the eggs.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Hey, they're hard to come by right now.
Yeah.
So y'all have so much going on right now. You just came off of a Grand Ole Opry performance last night. You have been on tour. You've got new music coming out. Don't you ever want to slow down a little bit?
No.
No, he likes to keep going. He doesn't like to sit still very long.
Well, it's an exciting year for you with so much happening. Why did it feel like the right time to go out on the road?
Well, after the stroke, we never knew, you never know after a stroke what the aftermath is, and his was a massive stroke. Yeah. And I think it was in spite of all of the doctors and all the news and all of they said you're going to live the rest of your life bedridden and in and out of hospitals. That's what they told us the day we left. So maybe we just did it in spite of them. Maybe we just said, you know what, we're not going to participate. So we went through several years of rehab every single day, and that was kind of our life for the next 2.5 years, 3 years. And Randy finally kind of got tired of that. And, you know, he was like a mule. He'd stick his heels in the ground before we left home. And if I made him go anyway, then when we got there, he would just sit there. And so then it kind of became the physical therapist, Tim would say, I don't think we're getting anywhere. I think y'all just need to go do other things, go live some life. So we just took that to mean we need to get back out on the road and go do stuff. So we did find that some of the best therapy was living life.
And the tour is called?
More Life.
More Life. I love that.
That was one of the last songs that Randy recorded before his stroke. Not knowing, obviously, that a stroke was right around the corner, but he recorded More Life, which is a beautiful song about looking back on your life and appreciating the things that you have and just taking more time, more life.
Well, what you're doing is very inspiring. I think it's one of the most inspiring things in country music right now, if not anywhere. So it's great to see, and I hope y'all, you know, are feeling that from all the fans, and I think you are.
He has some of the greatest fans, and they, you know, when you think of the longevity of his career, and those fans have been there since day one.
Yeah.
And we have them all the time say, I've been there since the early 80s. I've been listening to you since I had your first album. I have all of your... And then you run into the younger generation that will come up to Randy and say, Mr. Travis, could I take my picture with you? Or could I have your autograph? And they're 8 years old. And you're going, this is so wonderful. So, you know, it's 8 to 80, bow-legged, crippled, and crazy. They all love him. It's just, but in the inspirational stories that we hear from people all the time, I think it's just God's way of saying you're doing the right thing. You're doing what I put you here to do at this time and this season in your life.
Absolutely.
And he does it with so much, he's so open-armed and open-hearted about it. And that smile on his face, it just invites people in. And it lets them know everything's going to be okay. I think that's what life's about. We all get thrown challenges. You know, we all get our share of them in different ways, shapes, and forms. And it's not that you get them, it's how you get out of them and how you come out a better person. And you share those experiences to maybe lighten somebody else's load. Randy's the best at that.
Well, and that goes way back to even, you know, before the stroke and all your earlier recordings. I think people have always connected with your music, and it was kind of a way to lighten their load and to say that life is hard, and that, you know, a lot of the songs are about people who've been through some really tough times. So I guess that's what country music is all about.
It is. It is. It's the story of our lives. And I always say, I tell people, I said, Randy's music was the hymns of country music. because they stick around forever. They just, you just go back to them. I mean, it's like singing the songs at, at church and the hymns that have been around for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And they don't ever get replaced with something else because they're just good and solid. It's life. And Randy's music is that way. It's kind of a guidepost. It's the ups and downs, the in and outs, the good, the bad.
Yeah.
It's life.
Mary, I want to ask you a little bit about your own background. You grew up in Texas, in Plano, Texas.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about the house where you grew up.
The farmhouse?
Yeah.
Well, it was a 100-year-old farmhouse, and there was 8 in the family. There was, we had 3 bedrooms. Mom and Dad had one, the girls had one, and the 4 boys had one. But we had 1 bathroom. So you learned how to you didn't take a shower, you ran through a shower. But it was a farm, and we milked cows, hauled hay, chopped cotton, pitched oats. And I did that all my life till I left home at 18 and went to Baylor.
Did the two of you connect over somewhat similar backgrounds, even if they were in very different states? I mean, Randy, you grew up in North Carolina, Marshville, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he had 6 kids in his family, and a farming family.
Yeah.
And my daddy was from North Carolina. And we had 6 kids in our family, farming family. And so, yeah, that was something that made it. We met in 1990. We met years and years before we ever got together. And so we knew of each other. We knew of our backgrounds. And I think that was one of the things that was, a common denominator that made it so easy to understand each other, where you come from.
Mary, have you spent time in Marshville?
I have.
So if you were to describe kind of Randy's growing up, what did that look like? Have you been to the house where he grew up? Tell me a little bit about that.
It was a white farmhouse, kind of.
Yeah.
I think it was probably newer than the one I grew up in. But it was a sweet little farm house, and I'm sure at one point in time it was probably as crowded as our farmhouse. Yeah. But Dads would expand them as the families grew, and he had a beautiful red barn right across the road where they kept the horses, and it was a lot like ours. And they were in the middle of agriculture, cropland. What was it? Did y'all had like beans and tobacco and corn or something like that in that area? But I think it was a lot the same. They had the horses and the cows just like we did, and chickens, when eggs were cheap.
And music.
And music.
Yep.
Yeah.
And your dad was a musician.
Yep.
And was your mom musical?
No.
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 I don't think I ever heard of Bobby much
No.
in music. She sang at church, but
Yeah.
all the kids played music.
Right. Your brothers, right? There were 3 of you who really picking up the guitar, is that right? And nobody wanted to sing?
Yeah.
Well, there was he and Ricky. Yeah. Ricky was the oldest. Randy was second. Yeah. And Harold, their dad, said, all of you are going to play an instrument, so pick your instrument. Well, Ricky and Randy both picked the guitar. And they showed the most promise, I guess, in music. And so their dad sent them to Miss Kate Mangrum, who was a lady there in the area that taught guitar and piano. But Harold said, well, somebody in this family is going to sing. Because that's what Harold liked, was singing. I think he cut a record or 2 at some point. And so Ricky said, well, I'm not singing, and he was oldest, so he got to pick. So Miss Kate said, well, Randy, you're going to sing. And he opened his mouth, and out came that voice. And she got in touch with Harold. She goes, I think you got a singer. So,
You think? Yeah.
Isn't that funny? I mean, it was just kind of by accident. They figured out that Randy could sing. And I think he was 9 years old. Something like that.
Did your siblings or your mom and dad have a voice, anything like that?
Nothing like that.
No, not really.
I don't think I've ever heard another voice like that.
No. No, not even close.
And as he matured, even his control and the things he could do with voice, you still talk to artists. We run into artists all the time, and they're like, I don't know how he does what he does. I try to copy, I try to do what he does. I can't make my voice do that. And I don't know what it was that I don't know if it was an ear thing he heard. I don't know if it's just a talent that, a gift that God gave him and nobody else. But we hear that a lot from the artists that are like, man, I try, I just can't do it.
I want to ask y'all about the church and your faith and kind of where that came from, because it seems to be something that you have definitely bonded over, and it brought you together, and it's helped you get through some very tough times, the last 10 or 12 years especially. But where did that come from for you, Mary? I mean, did you grow up going to church on a regular basis?
It was not questionable, it was imperative.
Right, you weren't asked.
You weren't asked, you were told. And, we had all piled in our 49 Cadillac that was handed down from their parents in Virginia. And all they did was pile in that Cadillac, and we'd go to church. It was a country church that actually...
What denomination?
It was Episcopal.
Okay.
And it was one that we kind of resurrected because it was out in the country in North Dallas, which is not country anymore. But we'd take a dirt road it was right off the tollway in Preston Road, if you know anything about Dallas. But it was a dirt road still back then. And we'd all pile in and go, and we'd go early because we had, the yard to mow, or the parish hall to paint, or, stray cats to run out of the church before we had service, or whatever it was. It was great memories. And then afterwards we'd have dinner out on the ground. Everybody'd bring potluck, and it was a great upbringing as far as church is concerned. So we went. Dad was a lay reader, and I was in the choir, which was a sad thing because I can't sing. But it was a small church, and it grew from 2 families to 200 people and 3 services on a Sunday. So, and Randy, his mom was very, very faithful. She was just an angel with huge angel wings and polished halos. And but I think Randy watched Bobby as she never, did she make y'all go to church?
Yeah.
She made you go.
Yeah.
And so they did go too. Methodist? Was it
Yeah.
Methodist a lot? So, and then he always had it in his heart, in his spirit.
So, Randy, was there a big connection for you between the church and music?
A lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard you sing Amazing Grace. I think you've probably done it a few times, but you came out with that in a really powerful way. Is that a hymn that goes back to that really resonated with you when you were going to church early on?
Yeah.
It did.
A lot.
Are there other hymns that y'all love?
Well, he came out with several gospel albums.
Yeah.
After he had done so well in the country, people questioned, why would you make that crossover? It was important to him to do that music, to sing those songs. So he had a lot of the gospel music. Some he wrote, some were his own songs, and you go through, like I was talking about the hymnal a minute ago, and there's so many, How Great Thou Art, and Onward Christian Soldiers, and Amazing Grace, and you just go on and on with those old hymns that you just knew by heart.
What's one that really that you love? I mean, when you think about all the gospel music,
How Great
what's
Thou
one
Art.
of Randy? How Great Thou Art.
It's one of my favorites when I hear him sing that.
I'm wondering if there is a funny story about Randy's childhood that maybe people don't know as well. Is there something that comes to mind? I have heard that you weren't always a perfect angel.
Yeah.
So you got in a little trouble every now and then. Yeah. Is there a funny story that comes to mind?
I'm trying to think of funny, like he would riding horses,
Yeah.
and he rode horses all over the place. I think he was on a horse when he was 3 months old, but they had a little place called Pruitt's
Okay.
in Marshville, and it was a kind of a drive-through hamburger joint. I think it's still there. Is Pruitt's still there?
Yeah. Yep.
And he'd ride his horse through the drive-through.
That's great.
Yeah, and he
You
was-
probably weren't the only one to do that either. I bet there might have been a couple others to come through on a horse. Yeah.
a few other rowdies, yeah. And he would always make a joke about how he could ride or drive anything, he said, except for the 6 cars, 5 motorcycles, 3 carriages, whatever. He said, those all wrecked, and I'm going, oh, I don't know that I'd tell that. And he had an old truck that belonged to Ricky, and he borrowed it. And Ricky said, don't you wreck my truck. First thing he did was he goes and rolls it in a bar ditch. And, he said, Ricky was so mad at me. I said, I guess he was. And it was just right. And then Dennis was his little brother. Dennis lives down south of here off 65. But Dennis was, he was the youngest.
Yeah.
So Randy was 9 years older than him. And Mama would send Randy to go pick up Dennis at school. And he said, and he had this baby blue pickup truck, and I could hear it coming. And he said, I just cringed. He said, because we went the farm roads home about 80 miles an hour.
Oh, gosh.
He'd take a curve on 2 wheels. He said, I was scared to death. So I was always so mad when Mama sent Randy to pick me up.
I'm glad that you got through
Lived through
that.
it.
I'm glad you lived through that. Yeah.
By the grace
I
of
think we
God.
all are.
Yes,
Yeah.
by the grace of God, because he tried really hard to do himself in.
Mary, what was the first time that you heard Randy sing?
The first time I heard him sing,
Yeah.
mid-'80s. I mean, as soon as Storms of Life came out. Because being a country girl, being from Texas, that's just what we listened to was country music.
Yeah.
So I heard him when he came out. I'm 60, well, I'll be 66 this month, and so is he. Well, he'll be 66 in May. But, so I was already out of school. I'd already graduated Baylor, and when his Storms of Life came out. And I mean, I'd heard him for 15 years before. Was it 1990? It was 5 years. It was 5 years
Before y'all met.
before we met.
And did you meet in Nashville?
Dallas.
Oh, you met in Dallas. Okay. Okay.
My brother made shirts called stub shirts, and Randy always wore them. Those were the ones you'll see in most of his pictures and album covers. And but he would buy them here in Nashville. There was a store that had them. And Stubbs and I worked with my brother Stubbs in Dallas, and he'd come through and pick up more shirts or buttons, because they had button tapes. And so he'd come through there, and I thought he was pretty cute. But I went and got married. He got married, and,
It took a while, but it came around.
Yes,
Yeah.
20 years later. Yeah, I'm a slow learner.
I wanted to ask you guys about some of the new music that you've been working on. And y'all have talked about this a good bit, but it's such a remarkable story. And the song is Where That Came From, which came out last year. And I want to let you tell it because I'll mess it up, but it's so extraordinary to have something coming out using AI, using your voice, and that you are able to produce music that you're involved in and care about, and it sounds so wonderful. And this thing that a lot of us have kind of demonized, here it is, doing something that's really remarkable. But just tell me how that first kind of hatched, that idea of using AI to create this song using Randy's voice.
Chris Lacey, who is head of Warner, she's co-president there at Warner, and she called us, it was in July of 23, and she said, before I go any further with this, we've been approached by a team in London that has this AI platform, and they were asking if Warner was interested in doing anything with that or with them. And she said, the first thing that comes to my mind is giving Randy Travis back his voice. She said, that's all I could think of. So she called us, she said, would y'all be interested in doing that? Knowing that there's pushback, knowing that, like you said, demonized, but said it was one of those things, just to hear his voice again.
Yeah.
If I was the only one that listened to it, it would be worth trying it, just because I could hear that voice again. Yeah. And I wanted to do that a long time. So we said, well, sure, we'd love to. I would love to see how it comes out. And this was, you think about how fast AI has grown, and it's just exponential now. But this was 2 years ago, and we hadn't heard that much about it or of it. So we didn't really know. She sent, I think it was 45 different songs of Randy's to them. And they pulled the stems, vocal stems of Randy's voice. Since this is Southern living, I can say this and y'all will understand. It always reminded me of a clothesline where they took a vocal line and they just laid Randy's vocals on top of that. So it's really Randy's vocals. Sometimes when I say the clotheslines, the kids cringe. They're like, what's that? But that's the way I see it in my mind of how they do something like that. I know it's all with computer and it's all technology, but my mind's not big enough to get around all that. So,
but the initial track came from James Dupre, correct?
Yeah, he actually cut that song when he was with Warner.
Yeah.
After he was on The Voice and he signed with Warner, and he cut that, but it just sat on the shelf. So.
But his voice is that clothesline. His voice
is the clothesline.
Right.
On that one.
That's a good way to explain it. And then Randy's voice is
It's
kind
just
of
laid over the top.
layered over the top. Although I know it is a much more complicated process than that.
That's the simple form. That's the only way I know how to grasp it.
Yeah.
And I do know that when we came out then, Horses in Heaven, the next one, they used 4 different vocals.
So even more complicated.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to see. And when it went over to London, that's what they sent. And then when it came back, Kyle and Randy sat in front of Kyle's board and they manipulated whatever they could to make sure that the sounds and the inflections and the runs were Randy. Yeah. And it was an amazing thing to watch Kyle and Randy, because nobody knows Randy's voice better than Randy and Kyle.
And Kyle is your longtime producer who you worked with for 30 plus years, maybe longer.
40, since the first one. Yeah, since Storms of Life. He worked on Storms of Life with Randy. And he really wasn't a country producer, but he heard Randy's voice. He said, Martha Sharp was A&R head of A&R at Warner, who actually signed Randy and found him at Nashville Palace and said, this one I'm going to sign. And even though he'd been turned down by Warner. So Martha worked her magic, and she told Kyle, I want to sign this kid, and Kyle said, well, I've heard his voice and I'd love to work on it. To this day, he was there last night, at the Opry.
Yeah.
So, he knows.
And he's from
Randy's
Louisiana,
voice.
right?
I think he was from Ohio.
Yeah.
Oh, James?
James is from Louisiana.
James is from Louisiana. Okay.
Yeah, he's from Bayou Chico, Louisiana.
Yeah.
Kyle was from Ohio.
Kyle's from Ohio. Yeah. So I want to ask about your involvement in that process, Randy, because I think a lot of people might think that, you lost your ability to sing, and so you can't participate in the creation of this music, but you were very much a creator on this. You were in the studio with them, listening to it. You wanted to get it right. You wanted it to sound like you. You wanted it to sound like something that you were proud to put out. How did that communication happen? How did you communicate that with Kyle and the other folks working on it? Would you give kind of a thumbs up or thumbs down when you heard something you didn't like?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Randy's very good about getting his message across.
Yeah.
I always say he speaks volumes in his silence.
Yeah.
But Kyle has worked with him, since the stroke, several times. So he understands, and Randy knows everything going on. He's not missing a thing as far as his knowledge of things, his awareness of things, his detail. You know, they say that when you lose maybe one of your senses, the other ones get even more acute. That's the case with him and his detail. If I forget anything, a grocery list, forget to do something, he's on me. He's so detailed. And when we went into the studio with Kyle, after being in Kyle's studio just at home and going over the sounds and the nuances of the song and stuff, then we went into regular studio and with musicians, just like he did, when he was cutting albums, session musicians, producers. Kyle was there, engineers were there. So it was a full-blown project. And what people don't get, they go, oh, well, it's computer generated. They can just plug that in. It took us 11 months.
Right.
It took as long to do that one song as it does most people to make a whole album.
What was the hardest part of that? Was it the chorus? Was it a certain range that's hard to hit? Is it a tremolo kind of in the voice or something like that? What was the hardest part to get right?
I'm trying to think what was the biggest challenge.
Was it hard to make Randy happy with the final outcome?
Were you hard to please?
No.
No, Kyle, like I said, Kyle knows his voice so well.
Yeah.
That he had so much. Kyle had impact. He had input with the guys in London, so he was working with them before we ever got to hear it when it came back, and that's the point in time when they sat with Kyle and Randy sat in the studio and tweaked it. I don't know. The hardest part, there was something about the vibrato. I think it's what Kyle kept saying, that James's was different than Randy's. And to get that covered up and make it Randy's and not so much vibrato, because James had more vibrato in his voice. And that's the one thing I kept hearing Kyle talk about.
Right, gotcha. And then with the next song, Horses in Heaven, that was even harder. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
According to Kyle.
Yeah.
He said the first one, it just kind of fell into place. I think it spoiled him enough into saying, let's do a second one. And that one was a challenge. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it was just because of the music itself, the range involved. I'm not really sure. But they kept adding voices because they couldn't get what they needed from just James's. And so then they added Clay Walker, they added Jamie Johnson, and they added Wes Hightower. I couldn't remember his name, I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't think I know Wes yet, but he said it took all four of them though, because some of them it didn't work. It just didn't sound right.
It sounds great now. It's a great song. Yeah.
I think one of the other things that's hard is the pushback, and we knew we would get pushback because of AI.
Yeah.
To us, we knew, and Chris, that's when she asked if we were interested. She said, there'll be people that, don't like it, they don't support it. And we were like, we're okay with that.
Yeah.
because Randy's kind of always been on the leading edge in the country music scene. When they came out and started doing videos, he was one of the first to do those, the big video walls. He was one of the first. So he was never afraid of trying something new and different. And just like with every other technology, there's going to be pushback. It's
Sure.
the fear of the unknown. And until we get to know it, and until we learn to use it the right way, and do good things with it, and monitor the bad, and have laws against fraudulent use of it,
Yeah.
and we'll get there. Where would we be without a mobile phone now, or a computer? And all of those faced pushback.
Sure.
Apple Computer went bankrupt their first go around. Now look at us.
Yeah.
So it's that technology.
Randy, you have always been a champion of traditional country music, old school country music, the real thing, at a time when in the 80s, country was kind of going a different direction, and you were very passionate about that original country sound. And it's kind of ironic that that's been your whole career, and yet here you are on the absolute cutting edge of something that is so far ahead that we don't even know where it can go yet. I mean, you're really the first. You're a pioneer of this new kind of music. Do you find that kind of funny?
Yep.
He's a beautiful anomaly, isn't he?
Yeah.
People don't realize what, he can come up with and keep up with.
Obviously, I think we all want to support real music and real instruments, and that acoustic guitar, which will hopefully never go away, and of course, the sound of a human voice. But to have this as an option, as a way of creatively expressing yourself, when you've been through something like you have, it's pretty remarkable.
Yep.
Yeah.
Music is that's his soul.
Yeah.
Everything about Randy Travis was music and his passion for people. And that's what fueled him. He would always say the energy that he got from the crowd is what kept him coming back. It's like a good golf shot, on the 18th. You go back the next day for some more because it just feels right, and that's what he loved doing, and the music was so important to him. His whole life was music.
I want to ask you about the response that you've gotten, and you said you've gotten some pushback, but I've got to imagine that you're also hearing from people who are pulling for you and who feel inspired and maybe empowered by what you're doing. People who maybe didn't think that they would be able to create music again, and now they can. Have you heard some of those stories from people?
We haven't heard as much from people that have not been able to, that can now.
Yeah.
There's just a small part of the music world
That could even do that.
Well, that could do it, but that have been through what Randy's been through and have lived to tell about it in the way that he's telling about it, without words, but just putting into motion what he believes in. And I don't think that there's that many people. I think it's just it's very extraordinary that he's in the position that he's in. Full sound mind, knows exactly what he loves about the music, and is still here to be able to be involved with it, to be a part of it. There's people that have passed away and they want to do the AI using somebody that's, but Randy's here still.
Right, and involved in the process.
And very involved in the process, and I think that's what's so important and makes it so different than so many other scenarios. If it doesn't do anything else, it serves as a great way of saying this is a good use of AI.
Yeah.
Don't abuse it. Use it the good way. Use it the right way. We'll get there.
Yeah. I'm wondering if there have been, you mentioned earlier that there are several generations of fans of Randy's music. I'm wondering if there are, if there's a whole new generation of young fans that are maybe discovering Randy through some of this new music that hadn't heard him before. Because you're out there on the road, you're doing shows, you're doing a lot of things like the Grand Ole Opry. You're putting out this new music. Do you feel like you're reaching a younger generation of fans?
I really do.
Yeah.
I think that the exposure is great. The good thing is we see moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas bring grandkids or kids to these shows.
Yeah.
They've probably heard mom and dad, grandma, grandpa playing this music all their life, but then when they get to see him in person, even with the challenges that we've had with the health and everything, I think it gives them permission to dive into traditional country music. And a lot of them say, I started playing because I heard your music, Randy. Or Mr. Travis, I picked up a guitar. I got a guitar when I was 5 because of you. And you hear those songs, those stories, and you go, that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Right.
Is not taking it with you, but leaving it here, just like 3 wooden crosses.
Right.
It's what you leave behind you when you go. And he has left such a legacy and such an impact on people. Health challenges, struggles in life. He abused himself, but you're just with living hard and fast, but you can it's okay because you can come out on the other side. Just get your priorities in order, spend the time that you're supposed to spend it with people that you love. I think Randy Travis is just a picture of hope. He's a picture of inspiration.
I was thinking about that song on the way up here, 3 Wooden Crosses, and 3 wooden crosses on the right side of the highway.
Yeah.
And this idea that it's not what you take with you, it's what you leave behind. And it seems like you are leaving behind something very, very powerful and inspiring in terms of a legacy. So it's kind of neat to be bringing that back around.
Yeah.
And that song came out when? A long time ago?
1991? Yeah. It was, I think, like More Life, we spoke of that a minute ago. Yeah. Those are kind of songs that are about Randy Travis.
Yeah.
He walked on water. What a great song.
Yeah.
Of course, when he sang it, he was younger, and his grandpa was the one that walked on water for him. He loved his grandpa.
Or was it your great-grandfather?
It was your grandpa, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it was your grandfather. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it was his mama's daddy
Yeah.
that he
Okay.
was really close to as a grandpa. And then it was his daddy's mother that was Gaga that he was real close to. And she lived in the farmhouse next to him. And Gaga was kind of his refuge
Yep.
because Gaga would sit out on the porch and dip her snuff or whatever it was she did and drink her bourbon.
Like
in
an
the
old Southern
afternoon.
grandmother, yeah.
Yes, and sit on that porch and dip and spit and drink her bourbon and tell Randy everything's gonna be okay, honey. And so she was very dear to Randy, but it was his daddy's mama that he loved so much, and then his mama's daddy that was the grandpa that he loved.
Well, real quick, I want to ask you all about the new biopic that just got announced last night, and it's coming out. I guess, well, maybe it'll be a year or so.
They're shooting for spring.
It's called
26.
Forever and Ever, Amen. Right? It's got Clay Walker in it as the lead. He's going to be playing you. although there's going to be a couple of versions of you.
Yeah.
What are y'all most excited about when it comes to this project?
I think bringing Randy full color on this big screen, you can hear his music and it takes you places, time and place in life where you've been, or a bad relation gone good, or a good relationship gone bad, or whatever it is. His songs take you places. They all hit a spot in our life. A book, you read it, and you, with your own imagination, you fill in the blanks. You kind of draw your own pictures. When it gets to be a movie on the screen, then it becomes a reality. And I think that that's where people will get to see. And we want the guys that are involved, Andrew Hyatt and Eric Groth, when we first visited with them about it with Clay, we told them we want it to be very true to life. We don't want a lot of Hollywood theatrics. We don't want drama that's not. Randy lived the theatrics. He lived the drama. All you got to do is tell those stories. And so they came back at us with the first script. And, you're always kind of worried about what's in there. We were so pleased with it as far as the highlights and the lowlights of Randy's life. All we had to do was correct and define some of the dates, a little, the accuracy of some of the dates. We were fine with the content. They've moved some things around to make it flow a little better from the first script, but they just did they wrote a masterpiece as far as following his life and telling the story about Randy, the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it.
Well, Randy knows a thing or two about movies.
Yes.
So how do you feel about being at the center of one?
Well, oh no.
Do you feel like Jesse James or something?
Yeah.
No.
Well, I really hope y'all have a scene of Randy riding his horse up to the drive-in in the movie somewhere.
There should be. There should be. Yeah. I'm sure that will be, because that's pretty. That people don't forget it. And Randy, he was so cute, and he was always the first to laugh at himself. He owned his mistakes. He'd always tell you what he'd go back and do differently. If we got to do all that, but we don't. But he always owned his mistakes, and I think that's what endears us to Randy. He never blamed it on somebody else. It's mine, I earned it. And I think people need to see that out of somebody that's of his stature. It's like, yeah, I messed up. I shouldn't have done it that way, or I would do it differently. His life on the big screen is going to be a lot of fun to see, though.
I can't wait to see it.
I can't wait either. And like I said, they did a beautiful job with it so far.
Well, I just have one more question for y'all. And Mary, maybe you can speak for both of you guys. What does it mean to you to be Southern?
Is there anything else? Are there any choices? We're as country as dirt, really. And I love that. Growing up, like I said, on the farm, milking cows and hauling hay and chopping. There was times that I'd have to wear my milking boots and my overalls to school because I didn't get up in time to get the cows milked. And so Dad said, well, if you don't get up, then you don't have time to change clothes. And so I can't tell you how many times I went to cheerleading practice in milking boots and overalls. It was sad. And then Randy was the same way. His daddy had, of course, cows.
Not cheerleading practice, though.
No, he didn't have cheerleading practice, no. But his daddy had turkey houses. And they sold turkeys, I think it was to Tyson or somebody. And one year, like a virus went through the turkey house. So there was 2,500 dead turkeys that he and his brothers had to go through and clean out. He said it was the worst job he'd ever had in his life. And so he said, that's why when I came to Nashville and started cooking at the Nashville Palace, I was frying catfish. I was not about to fry chicken. It had enough of that. But yeah, being Southern is, I think it's something you're proud of. You know, I love being from the South, and I know that he loved being from North Carolina. You know, what is it? Grits.
Yep.
Girls raised in the South.
Yep.
So, yeah, I love being from Texas.
Yep.
There's just something so, I don't know, the people you know from the South, it's warm, it's friendly. You know, we hug. We don't shake hands as much. We hug. And we get up north and we hug and they look at you like, you know.
Yeah. Or you open a door for somebody and they kind of go, "What are you doing?"
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And if I remember, I used to fly for Southwest Airlines, and we'd have layovers up north, and you'd speak to somebody on the streets of Chicago. I mean, and their eyes would get big, and they'd look at you like they're fixing to, you know, like steal my billfold or something. I'm just speaking. It's just a whole different culture.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is that makes it that way, but there's something so warm and friendly about the South. I love the people up north now. You get used to them, and they get used to us, and everything's great. And it's wonderful to get to go and travel because it's beautiful. But I'm glad I'm from the South.
Yeah.
Aren't you?
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad y'all are here, and it's just been such an honor to be here with you guys. And congrats on the new music and the tour and the new film and everything else you're working on. And thanks for being on Biscuits and Jam.
I love it. Well, that's the other great thing about the South is the food.
Yeah.
And how it doesn't get better than turnip greens and stewed tomatoes. And
We'll do another one, and
Fried
we'll just talk about that.
there you go. There you go. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for letting us be with you. This was just a real treat, Sid. Thank you.
My pleasure.